Welcome to our college basketball Selection Sunday special here. We're going to break down the bracket presented by Fortnite. I'm Andy Katz. Let's first look sort of a macro view of this bracket. I mean, no surprise that Auburn was the number one overall seed. In fact, the number one seed's not a shocker at all, with Auburn being in the South, Duke in the East as a number one seed, Houston and Florida, the other two. There had been a report in the Houston Chronicle that Houston thought or was going to push maybe to go to San Francisco as it won. They have that right to sort of suggest that. Whether or not that report was true, bottom line is Houston is in Indianapolis, and Florida was the number one seed that was shipped west. Of course, they have to get there to those regional finals, but that's where we've got Auburn in the South, and that will be played in Atlanta if they get there, Duke in the East in Newark, Houston in the Midwest in Indianapolis, and Florida in the West in San Francisco. Of course, this is the kind of time where we talk a lot about the back end of the bracket, and then we sort of get to the tournament. We don't really dissect it too much. So the last four teams, we can't bat 1,000. I was a little surprised. My last four teams included West Virginia and Indiana. I did not have Xavier and North Carolina. Based on how North Carolina had produced a 1-12 quad one record, and Xavier losing in the Big East tournament, not able to get that Marquette win. But that's not what happened. The last four teams were Texas, Xavier, San Diego State, and North Carolina. The first four not making it were West Virginia. Excuse me. Let me correct myself. I did have Texas in. It was Indiana that I had in. So West Virginia, Indiana, Ohio State, and Boise. Repeating again, Texas, Xavier, San Diego State, and North Carolina, last four in. I did not have Xavier or Carolina. First four out, West Virginia, Indiana, Ohio State, and Boise State. Again, surprised by Indiana and West Virginia being left out. So that's on the back end of the bracket. The SEC got a record 14, I repeat, 14 schools in this tournament. It's remarkable. LSU and South Carolina, they're the only two. This goes back years that the SEC really made a shift, because there was a time when the SEC was playing a bunch of cupcakes in the non-conference, didn't really pour the kind of money they pour into football, into men's basketball, and that has changed. And here is the proof. The SEC, with their coaching hires, with their all-in on certainly now in transfers and NIL, it has produced 14 bids. What does that mean also, though, for bracketing? As we're going to talk through the bracket, it means that some of the matchups in the second round were unavoidable if they happen. Normally, you don't want to have teams from the same league meet in the second round. But with 14 schools, it's kind of unavoidable. And so what they tried to do, and we'll walk through this, is if a school only played that other school one time in the SEC, that's where the matchup would come a second time, potentially, in the second round. You did not want to have a team that maybe was your rival, like Mississippi State, Mississippi, or something like that. They play twice during the regular season. You wouldn't want to have that be a repeat in the second round of the NCAA tournament. So that was pretty remarkable. The fact that the Big East got four in, I thought it was only going to be three. The ACC also got four. I thought it was going to be three because I did not think North Carolina was going to be in. Now, they had a great quad 2, 3, and 4 record, but 1-12 in quad 1. And you can make the argument that, hey, they played a great schedule, and that's true, but they didn't win the games. And so at some point you have to say, okay, what are we assessing here? Just playing them or winning some of them? And this will be debated for quite some time, whether or not they deserve to be in. The other night, they had a chance to obviously pick up a quad 1 win, and they lost to Duke in the semifinals of the ACC tournament. Duke was without Cooper Flagg. They did not have Malik Brown, and they ended up blowing a lead, and they lost the game. So I'm surprised I want to make this key point, though. Bubba Cunningham is the athletic director at North Carolina. It's just a weird coincidence that the last team in is the year he's the chair of the committee. But I will tell you, and I've covered this for a long time, when that team is discussed, if it is your school or if you're a commissioner of a conference, you have to leave the room. And there are different votes down to the final vote. And so there were probably multiple times that Bubba Cunningham had to leave the room because North Carolina as a bubble team was being discussed. So I know some people may not believe that, but I'm telling you, that's how it works. There are 12 people in the room. There's other NCAA staff, but 12 committee members. And any time your school, if you're an AD, or a school in your conference, if you're a commissioner, is discussed, you have to leave the room, and you cannot vote during that time. So, just want to clear that air. So let's get to it. We'll get into, potential matchups because I think there's some great ones, and you'll see I picked some of them that we could, get into. And we want to start our bracket breakdown and my picks with the South. Okay, so we're going to start in the upper left quadrant of the South region. These first set of games will be played in Lexington. You've got Auburn taking on the winner of American and St. Francis. For these purposes, I am picking American out of the Patriot League to beat St. Francis. So you have an Auburn-American matchup in a 16-1. We've already seen it twice now. We are not going to see it a third time. Auburn's going to advance. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to go round by round. So let's do all of the first round, the second round, the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, and then the final. Next matchup we've got this is a shocker. So this is the first time where when I was seeing the bracket, I was shocked, I'll be honest, because not just that Louisville was an 8, they didn't have a great non-conference, played great in the ACC. So it's an 8-9 matchup against Creighton. This game's in Lexington. And Louisville and Lexington are in the state of Kentucky. They're not that far apart. So what does that mean? Louisville essentially is the de facto home team in their first 2 games as an 8 seed. I think they beat Creighton, which had not played well until the Big East tournament. They lost St. John's the other night. Louisville loses to Duke in a really good game, but the second half got away from them a little bit. So we're going to pause right there on that matchup, but it's a Auburn-Louisville 1-8 game in Lexington, okay? Now let's continue down the line here. Another bit of a surprise. Michigan will take on UCSD. The Tritons moving up from D3 to D1. Provisional member. They finally are eligible. They win the Big West, regular season, and the conference tournament. Talk to Aaron Olin, their head coach. This is a team that can play in a variety of ways. Veteran team. Really remarkable ascent of this program. But I'll tell you, I'm a little shocked that Michigan, which just won the Big Ten tournament, and I am talking to you here in Indianapolis. I just witnessed it. And they get a 5 in Denver against a tough opponent. So we've seen this in the past. Happened to Iowa a couple of years ago. They win the Big Ten tournament. They lose to Richmond a few days later. I don't think that'll be the case. I think Michigan is playing better than that right now. I'm going to go with Michigan to advance past UCSD, but this could be a late possession game. UCSD has the size to deal with Michigan. Also in Denver, we've got Texas A&M taking on Yale. Yale just won the Ivy on Sunday. It's not as good a Yale team that was there a year ago. And how about this for quirkiness? If Yale wins, you would have Danny Wolf, the star of Michigan, going against the team that he led last year in Yale, And last year, Yale beat Auburn in Spokane. So all these things potentially could happen if they were all to advance. But I don't see it happening. I think Buzz Williams and A&M will defend Yale much better than Auburn did a year ago. And I think A&M advances. We move down here. Ole Miss and sorry, my eyesight here for a second. Oh, so it's the sorry, thank you. It's the first four matchup of San Diego State and North Carolina. So, what's going to happen in Dayton first? I think San Diego State's going to defend UNC really well, and I am picking the Aztecs. You know, is this going to be an upset? Maybe. I know on one side you say, "Oh, Carolina's getting new life." San Diego State has to go to Dayton, but I'm going to pick the Aztecs. So Aztecs beating Carolina, taking on Ole Miss. This game will be in Milwaukee, and I like Ole Miss to advance. Sean Padula, who had a game winner in the SEC tournament. Chris Beard's a really good tournament coach. I like Ole Miss to advance there. Then we have Iowa State taking on Lipscomb. Iowa State has not been healthy. I saw them earlier in the season in Maui. They were great, but they're not completely healthy, but I think they're healthy enough to beat Lipscomb. So I like Iowa State to advance. Then we go to Cleveland, where we've got a 7-10 matchup of New Mexico and Marquette. New Mexico won the regular season of the Mountain West. Marquette's kind of been disappointing lately. Great guard matchup with Donovan Dent from New Mexico, who's the player of the year in Mountain West, and Cam Jones from Marquette. So, my first, I guess this would be my first upset. I am going seeding-wise with New Mexico over Marquette. So the Lobos advance. Also in Cleveland, Michigan State, which probably had an outside chance of getting a 1 if they had won, and maybe Tennessee had beaten Florida, but it didn't happen. So Michigan State is the 2, taking on Bryant, coached by Phil Martelli Jr. Takes the Bryant Bulldogs, winners of the America East, to the NCAA tournament. They do have a big man in Earl Timberlake who began his career at Memphis. But I don't think I think the dream dies here. In Cleveland, I like Michigan State to advance. So now, let's continue on with the bracket here. Auburn, Louisville in Lexington. I mean, this is crazy. You've got a 1-8 matchup where the 1 is at a crowd disadvantage. Haven't seen this in quite some time. I guess the last time I could say this, but it was kind of fluky, was when George Mason upset UConn, and the game was played in D.C., near, obviously, George Mason's campus in Virginia. But George Mason was an 11, so I can't fault the committee that, who would have thought George Mason would have gotten all the way to the Elite Eight? They had the home crowd, and they beat them. But this is a second-round game. So I think it's going to be a heck of a game. I think it's going to be wild, but I'm going to go with Auburn. They've been my team for much of the season, but I'm going to tell you, I think if this happens, if we get an Auburn-Louisville matchup in Lexington, that is going to be wild, crazy, okay? Michigan A&M. Here's where I do think the Golden Wolf tandem is going to be too much for A&M inside, so I like Michigan to advance to the Sweet 16. Then we go down the bracket, and we've got an Ole Miss-Iowa State matchup. Again, if Iowa State were healthy, if I were making this prediction 2 months ago, I would have flipped it. Not the case here. I'm going with Ole Miss and Chris Beard to advance to the Sweet 16. Michigan State, New Mexico, again, really good. I like the Nelly Jr. Joseph matchup inside against the Michigan State Bigs. Donovan Dent going against, Jaden Akins, Jace Richardson. I just think overall there's going to be too much talent for New Mexico to deal with. I like Michigan State to advance to take on Ole Miss. So now we've got our Sweet 16 in Atlanta of Auburn, Michigan, Ole Miss, Michigan State. I think Michigan State advances on the bottom against Ole Miss, and Auburn advances past Michigan at the top. Again, I think these will be two great games in Atlanta. Tremendous theater, both of them. So we'd have an Auburn-Michigan State Elite Eight matchup. It's kind of a shame because when we were in Maui, after Auburn won, the chatter was this was kind of the game Michigan State did not want to, have. And they didn't want to be in their bracket. They are. I think this is a Michigan State team that's good enough to get to the Final Four. Didn't play as well down the stretch against Wisconsin in the semis in Big Ten here in Indy. But, I just don't like this matchup. I think the bigs of Auburn are too strong, too talented for Michigan State's bigs. That's where I think this game gets decided. And I think Auburn gets out of the South region to the Final Four. So, we have done one region, and we have Auburn advancing. People, you were chalk, whatever. I at least had one upset. And I'll tell you, I don't know how many other people are going to pick San Diego State over UNC, so we'll see how I did there. All right, so let us drop down to the West bracket here in our bracket breakdown on Bleacher Report presented by Fortnite. We're going to start at the top. These games are in Raleigh, Florida, winning the SEC tournament title, taking on Norfolk State. Robert Jones does a great job in the MEAC, but Florida's going to advance. No 16-1 there. Then we got a UConn-Oklahoma game. Surprised that Oklahoma was a 9. I had them, I know 9, 10, whatever, but I had them at 10. I thought they'd be a double-digit seed. Taking on a UConn team that did not play well in that semifinal game against Creighton. I think Danny Hurley, obviously, in the NCAA tournament. I trust him. I think he gets it done. He gets out of the 8-9 game to play Florida in Raleigh. Then we've got Memphis taking on Colorado State. Everyone's looking for the 5-12 upset, but I've liked this Memphis team from day one in Maui. They ended up losing to Auburn in the Maui title game. Now, Tyrese Hunter's hurt. Don't know the status as we're doing this. But I'm going to trust this Memphis team, which weathered adversity and won the American, taking everyone's best shot, won it on Sunday. So I like Memphis to beat Colorado State and Nick Clifford, who's going to be a talent. This will be a game. Trust me, this will be a game in a 5-12. So I won't be shocked if a lot of people pick Colorado State. Now we go to the 4-13. Maryland taking on Grand Canyon. Now, this is not Bryce Drew's best Grand Canyon team. So they've got really good guard play. I don't think it's as good as the trio for Maryland. The Crab Five, led by freshman sensation Derek Queen, they advance in, where is this game? This is in Seattle. These games are in Seattle. Maryland advances. Let's keep going down. All right, real contrast of styles here, and two coaches have done a phenomenal job this season. Dennis Gates and Ben McCollum. Again, I really wrestled with this at the quick time I had to do this. I could see this going either way. If Drake can control the tempo, they will win. But I really do like this Missouri team. And so I wrestled, but I'm going to go with the SEC here. I'm going to go with Missouri. And these games are in Wichita, by the way. And so I think, by the way, great crowd supports, I think, for both in Wichita with nearby schools, Missouri and Drake. Then you've got Texas Tech taking on UNC Wilmington. I love this Texas Tech team. JT Toppin, Player of the Year in the Big 12. Transferred to New Mexico. Grant McCaslin doing a great job. I think Tech advances. Okay. Unbelievable theater here. I know how it works. Sometimes it just happens. But we've got a Kansas-Arkansas game in a 7-10 matchup. So you've got Arkansas, who moved up to a 10, and Kansas, by their play of late, slid to a 7. And this Kansas team that beat Michigan State and Duke earlier in the year. Bill Self, John Calipari, again, played for the national championship in 2008. Cal was at Memphis, Bill at Kansas, and Kansas won. Then 2012, Calipari at Kentucky. Self still at Kansas. Calipari won. Now he's at Arkansas. Self still at Kansas. First round matchup in Providence, by the way. Kansas kind of played themselves out of playing in Wichita. So wild game. Nearby for Cal's crew. He coached at UMass years ago. I got Arkansas in the upset, taking down Kansas. So that's my 10-7 right there. So by the way, 2 10-7 upsets on the left side of your bracket. Then we go to the bottom, St. John's taking on Omaha. The trash can, that's the assistant coach. That's their thing. Turn their season around. They smash the trash can when they win. Not going to matter. R.J. Lewis, Big East Player of the Year. Pitino. How about this? Rick Pitino back in Providence. He led the Friars to the 1987 Final Four out of Providence. He's back in Providence. Unbelievable right there. I'm telling you. I'll call it the dunk. They'll call it the amp. Atmosphere is going to be off the charts. All the Friar fans will be rooting for Rick. So the locals that bought tickets, they'll be going for the St. John's Red Storm. Even though the Red Storm are a rival of Providence, they'll be rooting for Rick Pitino. Is that all right for my accent there? I don't know. So, all right, here we go. Now we're going to go to the top of the bracket. You got to put St. John's up there on our screen. There we go. All right, let's advance here in the West. Florida in an absolute battle with UConn. They advance. By the way, born in Gainesville, but I'm not biased. So anyway, I'm going Florida over UConn. Great matchup in Raleigh. Now we got Memphis taking on Maryland. Again, the amount of talent on the floor in this game, this is like an NBA scout's dream. So much talent on the floor. Dane Danger's going to have his hands full against Derek Queen. Guard play is going to be off the charts. This is going to be, if this happens, this will be one of the best games of the tournament in a 4-5 game in Seattle. I got Maryland. Maryland advancing in a wild one. Then we go down, we got Missouri taking on Texas Tech. I've been riding the Red Raiders. I think they're just too good at key positions. I got Texas Tech advancing. Again, how about this matchup? Rick Pitino, John Calipari. Again, Louisville, Kentucky, great matchups. They didn't always love each other. And here they're going to meet, potentially. I mean, this would be great theater in Providence. I mean, you cannot script this any better. St. John's, Arkansas. If this happens, again, it could be wild at the dunk. What a matchup in Providence. But I'm going St. John's. They're the better team. Experience. They played there. But I think it's going to be unbelievable theater. I hope that happens in the bottom part of the bracket. Just for, tremendous theater. And I guarantee you, by the way, the those Providence games are going to be on CBS. I'm predicting it right now. They are going to be great games for all of us to see. So let's advance out of the West. Florida versus Maryland. Texas Tech versus St. John's. You looking for an upset? I got one for you. This is where I'm blowing it up. Maryland takes out the number 1 seed Florida. Texas Tech ends the dream of St. John's in San Francisco. And we've got a Maryland-Texas Tech matchup in San Fran. And the Terps in San Fran get out of the West and win the West bracket. So we got Auburn, we got Maryland. Not all chalk yet, all right? Let's go to their chat box here before we go to the right side of the bracket. Let's go down to, well, that matchup wouldn't happen there, so I'm sorry. Let's go to the third question we got here. Carolina beating San Diego State and Ole Miss. That's not really a question. Is that a statement? I guess it's a statement, and that person believes it. Could it happen? Of course it could happen. It could happen. I'm not predicting it, though. We'll get to the Duke stuff because we haven't done them yet. All SEC Final Four, we'll get to that later. Let's deal with the questions on this side of the bracket. So, Michigan State, Iowa State. If we get that in the Sweet 16, in that scenario, I like Michigan State, mainly because of the way Iowa State's playing. All right, so let's do some underdogs. So I gave you my picks, but let me blow this up a little. I like the underdog question. If there are upsets that I did not pick, where could they be? All right. So first off, these are things I wouldn't be shocked by. If UC San Diego beat Michigan, as well as Michigan just played here in Indianapolis, wouldn't be shocked by that. The Tritons are pretty good. Wouldn't be shocked if Yale won. Okay, so if you want to pick that, no shocker there. Moving further down, again, we mentioned Colorado State. I wouldn't be shocked if they beat Memphis, although I think Memphis will win. I wouldn't be shocked if Drake beats Missouri. And that's probably it. Those are my potential upset picks. Flaws of St. John's, maybe experience. They've never been in this moment, although they did have the great moments in New York. Yes, Florida's depth can wear teams down, and that would be an issue for Maryland. But the NCAA tournament's different. The timeouts are incredibly long, okay? So, that's where I don't think Maryland's depth hurts them. All right, we'll do this again at the other side. Let's go to the upper right part of your bracket, and that is the East region, led by Duke. So Duke will be in Raleigh. That was a given. Taking on either American or Mount St. Mary's, and I'm going with American to win that, and Duke to win the first round game. No 16-1 here. Cooper Flagg's health, we don't know, but they said he will play. We don't know how effective he'll be. All right, now we're going down to a Mississippi State Baylor 8-9 game. Baylor has not played well. VJ Edgecombe, NBA draft lottery type guy, so he'll be the best talent on the floor, but Josh Hubbard is going to be the best guard. Guards win, so do the Bulldogs. So the Bulldogs advance. So those games in Raleigh. Now we go down to Seattle. Oregon taking on Liberty. Contrasting styles, but I think this Oregon team is a major sleeper. Major. I got the Ducks going by. Nate Biddle's going to be a problem. If Jackson Shelstad makes shots, they're going to win games. Continuing in Seattle, we've got Arizona against Akron. I wrestled with this one. The Zips are an outstanding team. They won the MAC, beat Miami of Ohio. I'm going to answer my own question here and say this is an upset I could see happening. I didn't have the guts to pick it, but I could definitely see it happening. The Zips could take down Arizona, but I'm picking Arizona. All right, now we're going further down to Denver, and we've got BYU VCU. And VCU won the A-10 on Sunday. BYU's been absolutely rolling before they ran into Houston. So I got BYU, BYU advancing. Richie Saunders has been a phenomenal talent of late. I like the Cougars advancing. Wisconsin taking on Montana in a 3-14 game. I'll tell you, I was shocked that the Badgers got shipped as a 3 to Denver. And it's on a Thursday, if I'm not mistaken. So that's a quick turnaround. It's Sunday afternoon, and they're in Indianapolis. So go home and head to Denver. But I like the Badgers. You know, John Tonje is going to have to shoot better, but I like the Badgers taking down Montana. So let's continue down the bottom part. These are in Cleveland, and we've got St. Mary's taking on Vanderbilt and Alabama taking on Robert Morris. I really wrestled with this, but, you know, I do think that St. Mary's sometimes, you know, can have trouble. Now, they're really difficult to score against, but they have a hard time scoring. And I think Vanderbilt wins this game. So I'm going Vandy. Have you noticed a trend here? 10 sevens. 10 sevens. Okay, I'm 3 for 3 in 10 sevens. And then I got Alabama advancing. Grant Nelson's health still a little question. All right, so we've got a Duke Mississippi State game. I don't think Mississippi State can handle Duke's inside. Duke advances. We got a Pac-12 rematch. Oregon, Arizona, two very familiar foes. They've had many a battle in the Pac-12. Oregon gets the best of them. I got Oregon advancing. BYU, Wisconsin. Don't like this draw for the Badgers. I think Wisconsin could trouble to keep up with BYU scoring-wise. Even though they can make threes, they're going to have to make threes to survive in this game. I got BYU advancing. Then we've got Vanderbilt versus Alabama, an SEC rematch. I like Alabama to advance. Quite simply the better team. So now we're in Newark, and we've got Duke, Oregon, BYU, Alabama. I think the Duke-Oregon game could be one of the best Sweet 16 games that we see. And this is where I'm, again, don't have the guts to pick it, but I could definitely see Oregon advancing. And by the way, if Oregon gets by Duke, I think they're getting to the Final Four. Just saying. But I got Duke. And then BYU, Alabama, I think it's going to be a wild game, high scoring. I mean, that's a game that could be 102 to 98. But I like Alabama. I like BYU because I don't know how healthy Grant Nelson is. So here's where an Alabama team that I picked at the beginning of the season, #1, but they haven't been as consistent or healthy at times. So I got a Duke-BYU matchup in Newark. How about that? There's some upsets there for you. But I got Duke advancing. But if you tell me in Newark we had Oregon, BYU, I wouldn't be shocked by that. All right. So Duke advancing out of the East. Let's go to our final region. Lower right is the Midwest. Houston taking on SIU Edwardsville. Their first appearance. No way can they score well enough. Houston advances. These games are in Wichita. Then we've got a grade 8-9 matchup between Gonzaga and Georgia. Asa Newell's a big-time talent for the Bulldogs. 2 Bulldogs there, by the way. But I think Gonzaga with Ryan Nembhard and Graham Ike, their experience is going to be too much for there. They advance. Then we've got in Providence, we've got Clemson taking on McNeese. And Purdue High Point. Now, again, this is a 12-5 that I could see happening, but I'm not going to pick it. I got Clemson. I think the McNeese team last year was better. High Point, Purdue. Purdue's not playing well right now, but I think they get by this game. So I've got Purdue advancing there. Now let's go further down the bracket. The 4-11 matchup. This is the Texas Xavier first four, and I've got Texas beating Xavier. And here's an upset. It would be an 11-4 game in the first round. I think Texas's momentum lately, Trey Johnson, Illinois just isn't right. Now, maybe things will change, but I've seen them look wrong, okay? And more than I have look playing well. And I know they haven't been healthy, but I'm going with an upset here. I'm going Texas. Texas over Illinois. Then we've got Troy taking on Kentucky in a 3-14. This game is in Milwaukee. These games are in Milwaukee. And I like Kentucky taking out Troy, especially Lamont Butler could be back. Then we go to Lexington, and we've got UCLA, Utah State. I think UCLA will play much better than they did, certainly here in the Big Ten tournament. I like the Bruins to advance. So 3 of 4 10-7s. But I can see Utah State winning, but this is where my trend stops, okay? Tennessee taking on Wofford. I like Tennessee. Played in the SEC title game. All right, so let's get everyone through here. Gonzaga trying to go to 10 straight Sweet 16s. Unbelievable streak. I think it dies here. Don't think they'll be able to score as well against Houston's defense. Houston advances. Clemson taking on Purdue. Again, I don't like the mojo right now with Purdue. I like Clemson in this matchup. Clemson advances. So I got a Houston-Clemson matchup in Indianapolis, denying Purdue the right to get to Indy. So let's advance those two at the top. Let's go to the bottom, where we've got an upset of Texas taking on Kentucky. I like Kentucky to advance out of this and get to Indianapolis. How about that? Kentucky and Indy. That should be something. Then UCLA, Tennessee. I actually like UCLA knocking off Tennessee, and I like UCLA going to play Kentucky in Indy. So, in Indianapolis, Houston, Clemson, Kentucky, UCLA. How about Kentucky, 2 Blue Bloods in Lucas Oil Stadium? Wow, that'll be something. So, but the Kentucky crowd will be off the charts. I like Houston swallowing up Clemson. They advance. And I like Kentucky beating UCLA. But here's where it gets interesting. A Houston-Kentucky matchup in Indy. I'm too enamored with Houston's defense. They won the Big 12 regular season. They won the Big 12 tournament. I'm going Houston. So, we're going to take a couple quick questions, and then we're going to bring everything home. BYU versus Bama, how high do I see the score getting? I think it's going to be, as I said, the over-under, you're going to be pushing 200. What advances Vanderbilt? They're going to have great guard play. How is Vandy ranked higher than Ole Miss? How are they ranked higher? Vandy. No, Vandy was a 10. Ole Miss was an 8, so that's not true. Can Wofford beat Tennessee? I would say no. Could High Point beat Purdue? Yes, they could. My favorite Sweet 16 Elite 8 games. All right. So before we get to the Final Four, if this is me, my picks, as I said, Sweet 16, I think a Duke-Oregon game would be great. BYU-Alabama, I think all those would be fantastic. Kentucky-UCLA would be off the charts. I think a Texas-Tech-St. John's matchup would be great. Florida-Maryland, love it. And Auburn-Michigan, I think would be fantastic. If we get any combinations in the West, I think they're all going to be good elite matchups. I think a Michigan State-Auburn game in Atlanta, heavy Auburn influence, but that would be fantastic. And then whether it's Duke, BYU, Duke, Alabama, Oregon, BYU. Again, I'm being biased here. I think that in the Elite Eight would be great. You know, and again, if we have in a Houston, Kentucky, and Indy, I mean, come on, that's fantastic. Absolutely great matchup in Indianapolis. So I'd love that. All right, so let's get to our Final Four. Crown a champ. Let's crown a champ. So one national semifinal. I've got Auburn taking on Maryland, and I've got Duke taking on Houston. I wrestled with this, but I can't stray from Auburn. Even though they've struggled lately, I still think they're the best team in the country. I'm going Auburn over Maryland. Really having a hard time with this one too. Duke, Houston. All right? Really having a hard time here because Houston defends so well. But all season long, I've thought Auburn and Duke are the best teams. So last year, we had the two best teams face off, tip-off, in Purdue and UConn. That's what we had. I'm going to roll the dice again. Say we're going to get it in San Antonio. To me, the two best teams, Auburn and Duke. Auburn. Auburn is the national champ. How great would this be, though? If we get this, we're going to have the two top contenders for National Player of the Year in Janai Broome and Cooper Flagg. Two best teams, two top seeds, and we got Auburn taking it home. So, those are my picks. That's what I'm feeling. As soon as I get the bracket, that's what I'm feeling right here, okay? Scribbling it out. My doctor's handwriting. That's what I'm feeling. I think, do we have time for a question or two or no? All right, we'll do a couple quick questions. Do I see the Zags beating Houston? No, I don't think they can score enough. As I said, could Auburn lose in the Sweet 16? Sure. They've already lost a bunch in the SEC down the stretch. They could lose to Michigan and blow up my bracket. That could happen. But I'm not going to predict it. I'm sorry. So I'm going to say that Auburn's going to win it. Oh, you know, the negativity comes in. Auburn's peaked already. Maybe this was good for them. Maybe a little humility was good for the Auburn Tigers. Reset. A reset has occurred. All right? That's the reset. Oh, someone wants to go all the way back to Carolina to put a bow on everything. What's their ceiling? I mean, I guess they could get to the Sweet 16. I just don't think they're good enough. Their guards are a little erratic. Their inside game has not been consistent. So, no, they're not getting the natty. It's not like a new life because they got the first four. Have we had a first four get to the Final Four? Yes. It's happened twice. VCU and UCLA. It's hard to call Maryland a Cinderella team in this chat because Maryland was a 4. So I don't think that can be. We'll close with the upset alert because everyone wants to fill out their brackets. As I said, I picked 3 of 4 10-7s. Everyone wants a 12-5. I didn't pick them, but in the 12-5 matchups, look at this one that's a little not scribbled here. In the 12-5 games, you know, I could see, bear with me here. I guess you could see UC and San Diego over Michigan. Could see it. I don't think Liberty's beating Oregon, so I wouldn't pick that one if you're looking for a 12-5. I don't think McNeese is beating Clemson. I wouldn't pick that one. And Colorado State, Memphis. I think the two 12-5s people will pick more will be the Colorado State, Memphis one and the UC San Diego, Michigan. But I'm not picking it. You know, my Cinderella, I mean, last year we had NC State in the Final Four. We've had FAU. We've had VCU. We've had Wichita. We've had George Mason. I don't see a double-digit seed getting there this year. But I do think, and I know Florida fans are going to be all over me, but I do think that's where the upsets are going to come in the West. Or if Cooper Flagg's not 100%, Oregon could come out of the East. that could be one. So I'm only doing with what I know right now, my gut. And things will change. So we'll see. All right. So let's wrap this up. I appreciate everyone chiming in, watching us. This has been our Bleacher Report bracket breakdown and our bracket picks presented by Fortnite. It's been great throughout the course of the season. I know we will chat again, but a massive shout out to Caitlin Schmidt, who has done an outstanding job throughout the course of the season producing this. Ian Evans back in our studio, always bringing it. So a big thank you to everyone. But hey, the madness begins right now.